But there were a couple times we got turned around in there, and we're definitely.
And then you suddenly end up in Tonopah. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. So, anyway, we just wanted to sit down and catch up. The only way to rile you in to just see what's going on is invite you over and say, hey,
Oh, yeah.
what's going on with Brandon Dodge? Seems like you got a ton of stuff cooking.
Oh, I've got so much stuff going on. I mean, between the teaching, both in schools, helping out schools that don't have like opportunity. That's what I've been doing over in Loyalton is basically they haven't had a music program anywhere between 8 and 30 years.
You're kidding me.
And the only reason why I can't give a direct answer is because everyone I've talked to has given me a different answer because they don't know. It's been so long since they've had a music program. And it was so bad. Whoever that was in charge, one of the band directors that they got over there, they basically ran him out of town.
The band director?
Yeah. And
Why?
no one could tell me,
Wow.
or no one who is there now knew enough about what was going on. But basically, they didn't like him so much that most of the instruments that they had, they threw him in the trash. They threw it straight up in a dumpster and was like, "We're done with you." And all the stuff that they had was all that was left that they couldn't find or that they forgot about or whatever.
Are you sure you want to go in there? This sounds like a community that might tar and feather a music teacher. Are you sure you're up for that?
Well, a couple of good things about that. One, they like me. Two, I'm not actually hired by the school district.
Oh.
I'm hired by a nonprofit. So, and they really like this nonprofit. So, they kind of play nice with me a little bit in that regard. But yeah, all the stuff that they had is like from the 60s or something like that.
Right.
And it's practically unusable. So we basically had to start from scratch.
From scratch.
Luckily, we've gotten some grants to help out and all that. But, you know, it's growing. The kids are doing a great job. We've currently been working on samba music instead of doing like a traditional marching band because I think it'd be more fun for the kids and they really enjoyed it.
Nice.
We've been learning hand drum stuff like congas because, again, it's something new and different that they're enjoying. And then this semester, actually, we started up doing rock bands. So some people are playing guitars or basses or pianos or the drum set. So it's definitely enjoyable that way.
Yeah, I've been kind of waiting for school to kind of catch up to the culture with that because, I mean, that's part of why it's hard to keep kids' interest because, you know, it's like, oh, choose violin, trumpet.
Yep.
And it's like, but I want to be a Beatle.
Well, that's the beauty of this whole I'm not part of the school district is because I am hired by a nonprofit in the school, I don't have to follow all of the rules and regulations.
So are you heading the whole program or just percussion?
Just percussion. They have a strings teacher who shows up twice a week, and then there's a guitar teacher who helps me out with the rock band who shows up twice a week. So I show up 4 times a week. Last semester, I was there all 5 days a week. Teaching 3 classes.
Brandon, how do you do this? Because just catching up on the way in, you somehow cram like 72 hours into a single day. How is this? Do you have like some cool planner? What the heck is?
So how it worked, how it is so when I went to go teach at Loyalton, I told them, hey, I'm already working at other schools. My mornings are pretty booked. And then in the evenings, I'm doing like private lessons and things. And I still have concerts and stuff. And they're like, great, we will take you from after lunch till school's out. So basically it's 12:30 to 3. And it's like, oh, that fits perfectly with everything I'm doing already. So that's how I've done it is basically just been like, hey, I would like to do this. It's just time. And then they're like, well, funny you should say that. We will fit into your schedule.
Wow.
So that's why I've been able to do what I've been able to do.
It's impressive. I mean, I think we should
really is.
we should have Brandon come in and do a time management course.
Yeah. Yeah. we kind of need it, you know, because we're always just, you know,
Time and
working,
project
working,
management.
doing
Are
something.
you up for doing a time management
I could totally
course for
do
us?
some of that, yeah. It won't be like a crazy long one, but I could totally sit there for like an hour or so and tell you how to do things, you know.
Yep.
'Cause yeah, you need it. Then there's rehearsals with various bands that I'm in. I rehearse with the Reno Pops Orchestra. I've got Freemium, my jazz band, and then I've got the Batamba Collective, which is a hand drumming ensemble.
Right.
And we all meet, you know, and do stuff. So balancing all of that, and then
Not overlapping with the bookings and all that kind of
right,
stuff.
yeah.
Wow.
And then I also do a duo, which is going to turn into a trio. It's harp and vibraphone, but we're going to add in a piano player here pretty soon, hopefully. And we do stuff together that way as well. Not to mention all of the random solo stuff I have to do.
Not to mention what you're doing with Katie Sound. Not to
Yep.
mention
Yep.
eating,
Yep.
sleeping.
And surprisingly, my phone still says I spend a bunch of time on my phone, like watching YouTube or whatever. So,
Yeah, that sounds about right. So speaking of all the music projects you are involved in, you're bringing somebody here in. We're talking April, right?
yep, we're talking April.
And actually, in this conversation, he messaged me and he wants to know if we can do a Sunday, which is absolutely fine. But that means I'm off and you're leaning on him to host you. Are you okay with that?
Would you want to host us?
Sure,
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I'm down.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Cool.
So we're talking Sunday, April.
Oh, 9th,
Yeah.
I think it is.
So what's the band that you're bringing in?
It's the Batama Collective.
The Batama Collective.
Yeah, they've been here once before, but we did like a recording session, like semi
Right.
live thing. And they are a group that plays a bunch of non-Western music. So think like Brazil, Cuba, Africa, and India, that kind of music. All of this like Afrocentric or really just foreign to us type of music. But then we incorporate Western stuff into it. So like we have electronics, we have some like pads and crazy stuff in the background. There's melodic content. I'm playing like a vibraphone sometimes, or sometimes I'm playing drum set patterns on non-drum set instruments. And then we, so that way it's something that the audience can kind of connect to, but then they can also be like, but there's a bunch of other stuff. So they can kind of get immersed in a bunch of weird stuff as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does this sound any familiar to you at all? I mean, not exactly the same, but John and I have been discussing because we're doing the first project for the studio here, and we actually have. Do we have all 8 recorded now, or we have one more?
We have 8 recorded. We're just waiting on you and Robert should be done on Saturday.
Right, and so we're doing a Friends of the Zendan
Mm-hmm.
CD, Volume 1, because we're already started in on Volume 2.
Oh,
8 hours.
nice.
But a lot of what we discuss is we're going to do acoustic versions of everybody because we have a lot of professional musicians and amateur musicians, but we're going to do acoustic versions. But I really want to do atypical percussion stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm real interested to hear you guys come through and what you guys
Oh, yeah.
got going on, because I came in a couple weekends ago and said, John, I want to do all this, but I want to do this outside of a traditional 5-piece drum kit.
Yes. Almost nothing that Batama does is traditional. Even when we go to like paying attention to Brazilian music, like we'll play some samba music, but we're using Cuban instruments, and it's actually mixed into a song that's based off of North Indian classical music. So it's just like
North Indian. What do
yeah.
you mean?
So in India, a little bit of history about India is way back in the day, there were India got invaded,
Okay.
but only half of India got invaded. There was the north and the south.
Okay.
And one part of the country, there's like no religion or anything is allowed. Certain art is not allowed. So everything they had to do was very abstract, being
In
like
India?
in India, yeah.
In India, the home of what, 12,000 religions or something now?
Yeah.
Anyway.
But then the other side was still under control of India, and they could do kind of whatever they want. So what their stuff was very like obvious. It's like, yes, this is for, religion. This is for this. Here's a dance for this god or whatever it is. Whereas the other way, they're like, yeah, we're doing like these circles and squares and much more like geometrical things, and by the way, it's related to this religion. But you don't know that, because if you were to know that, we would get murdered. That's kind of what ended up happening.
No, back up for just a minute, because I want to hear this, but I'm interested in something you're touching on. So you, having the education you do in music,
Mm-hmm.
in the background as an instructor, and a ton more about the history of music than I probably will ever know. You've probably forgotten more about music history than I will ever know. Music in general, does it tie to some form of religion as it, or because I've thought about this, or is it just an organic thing, or does it usually tie to a culture and their religious beliefs?
So, music was actually like one of the first things for conversation.
Conversation.
Yeah. So, just like us talking right now, one of the early forms of conversation was actually through music. They would, you know, have music as like to try and like communicate from city to city. Sometimes that's why during the slave trade back, you know, in the 1800s, 1700s, they actually banned slaves from playing drums and stuff because certain
'Cause
rhythms
they
they
could
could
tell
play.
somebody's coming or something like that.
Yeah, they could actually communicate from the next city over. So it used to be a communication thing, and then when we got much better with conversation, with you know actually using our voice and talking, and then it became more ceremonial, very religious a lot of the time, very culturally driven. Um, so now it's part of your cultural or artistic identity. Impressionism, we know that for like paintings and stuff, but there was impressionism for music too.
Right.
Abstract art, abstract music. All of the different arts actually had their own movements around the same time, reflective of whatever was happening. Um,
How interesting.
so
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's kind of like why rock and roll was so crazy, was because you know that's like anti-religion almost. Like the churches were like, no, this is wrong. You go to hell for that. It was like 3 eternities in hell for a guitar if you're a guitar player, and then it was like 5 if you were a drummer. Like it was, they had different numbers for these for whatever reason.
Who had these numbers?
the church, the Catholic Church,
Are
or
you talking here in the States, or are you talking
in America and in Europe, but mostly in America.
really?
Yeah, they were like, no, this is not okay. And part of it was because a lot of rock and roll was, you know, like rebelling against the whatever that was going on, and a lot of it was also bringing in the younger people, being like, wow, this is really cool, this is new, enjoying this instead of like what has been happening. It's just going against the norm, the status quo. And the church didn't like that because they want the control.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got somebody like Queen who showed up who was trying to break the mold of rock and roll because there was like this set, and if you didn't follow them, you were an outsider, and they didn't like that. And Queen was definitely an outsider, so they created an identity for all the outsiders to have somewhere to be. And so now there's like different, you know, cultures and things just within rock.
You know, it's coming up in my mind, John, as we sit here and do this, and it's interesting to pick your brain. I have another question about music too in a second, though. But it appears to me, based on this conversation and thinking things through, we identify ourselves by the music we listen to. When we were in high school, there was the hard rockers, the punk rockers, this and that, and you know, we think of, you know, I'm an American or patriotism and this and that, but we as much identify by music as I'm listening to this. I mean, I'm not going to say it came up in that thought came up just now, but can you think of an instance that's not true of that? I mean,
No, it really is. I mean, like a lot of
you got
know, you have a
Southern
lot of-
gospel, you have,
I mean, country music's a big one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who will die saying country is the best thing ever, and then there's other people who will be like, country's the worst thing that ever happened.
so it's really tribal in a way. I mean, it's instinctual.
Yeah, I remember in high school you had certain cliques that were, you know, segregated amongst the lunch, you know, lunch area, and whoever hung out with who, you always knew, you know, like what kind of music they listened to and whatever, and they always had like certain ways that they dressed, and you know, and then they were, and I don't know, I noticed that a lot, especially in band. In band, you
Right, but it's
notice that
such
a
an
lot.
identifying, you know, you can name your clique, you know, that guy's a, you know, metalhead or a punk rocker, or, I guess that's not really true in our culture of pop and things like that, because there were jocks and that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
that
and then you
isn't
have people
true.
like me that listen to everything, and I just didn't. I just fit in with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Or like me, I listened to everybody and didn't fit in with anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just you, Mike.
But that's the identity thing is, hey, they're wearing a Metallica shirt. They're a Metallica fan.
No, that's
They're my friend immediately,
right. No, it was very, very tribal.
Mm-hmm.
So, being this, I have another question for you, and you may or may not know the answer to it, but I've jumped down a couple rabbit holes, and I've suddenly got a fascination with frequency. And I saw a couple rabbit holes that actually talked about late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Most music was defined around a 432 megahertz frequency. Do you know much about this?
I know a fair amount about this,
And
actually.
then they actually changed it to a 440A.
Mm-hmm.
And instituted that as the 440A. But some people say it just depends on who you listen to. Some people say that the 440 is not as healthy of a frequency as 432. What do you know about this, Brandon?
So way back in the day, I'm gonna go back to like Gregorian chants, like the 900s, the 1000.
This is where I was hoping he'd go.
Everything was relative. Everything was based off of some guy who leads the congregation, and he sings, and then everyone sings in relation to what he's saying. We didn't care too
Which
much.
makes sense because you weren't able to measure it. You had human measuring sticks.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we started to get instruments and things that could be set in tuning or whatever. So we started to look at the mathematics of it. I mean, if you really wanted to, you go back to Greeks, and they actually figured out like the Pythagoras whole situation of how like if you take a string and you cut it in half, now it produces a tone that's an octave higher, things like that.
Right.
So mathematically, we've had it since the Greek times. But for
So
like
Pythagorean and that kind of theory, actually, I've never even attached that to music. But anyway, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, moving forward, we started to like, okay, this is mathematically beautiful because of how it lines up with the halves and wholes. That's part of why a lot of people don't like A440, because A440, if you go an octave lower, it's A220. If you go an octave lower, it's A110. That's fine. But if you go to like a C, so A440, and then you go up to the C, 2 notes up, it's like 473.98532. Like it just goes into this crazy number that's really not pretty.
Okay.
So that was one thing that a lot of people didn't like. But the reason why the 440, 432, 4 whatever, that happened during the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s when opera was a big deal. And
Right, and they had to standardize it somehow, right?
no, they were actually fighting over it. So how it works is if you are perfectly in tune with a bunch of other instruments, it's just like when you like dip your hand in water that's perfect temperature to your body temperature, it feels like your hand disappears, right? So what happens is your sound kind of just molds with everyone else's sound. If you are slightly flat, you actually sound softer than everyone around you. And if you're a little sharp, you actually sound a little louder because you're floating over all of their sound. So what happened was people would slowly get a little higher and higher and higher because they wanted to be louder, but actually they ended up being, so they were kind of like fighting over each other that way. And part of the reason why we stopped this fight was because singers couldn't keep up. You know, the vocal cords, the human voice, we can only go so high.
Right.
And so a lot of operas and stuff are like, no, we stop it here. So 432 was one of them. 440 was another. 442 was another one. 438 was another one. But they started, this battle started like at 410, 400. Like it started down there. And what's funny about that is, so orchestras and operas and all that, they got the memo and they're like, cool, we're going to stop it here. And actually in America, we're 440, but if you go to Europe, it's 442. But then you go to
432 or 440?
42. Yeah. And then you go to
442?
Yep. And then
I've
I
never
think
heard
it's
that.
France that's 445, and then I think it's Germany that's 436.
Even now, in modern times.
Yeah, like now. But obviously it's all relative still. Like there are some orchestras that play it different anyway. For percussion specifically, especially like mallet instruments like vibraphone and stuff, when we play in an orchestra in America, they're tuned to 440, and a lot of times we're tuned to 442 because we're not a very loud instrument and they want us to cut better. Or when you're out of tune with somebody, you get that wah-wah effect where like you can hear the dissonance because it's all sound waves, like literal sine waves, and you can hear them crossing over each other. And they like that with things like the bells, the glockenspiel or whatever, because it sounds like shimmer on the instrument. So sometimes that's why percussion gets that. Now, we've figured that out kind of for rock bands, for orchestras and all that. There's an instrument that actually didn't get that memo until a lot later, and that is the bagpipes.
Which are really high
They kept going. They're
Really
at like
high.
486.
and pitchy. Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah. In fact, there was a bagpipe player who worked on. They got a set of bagpipes that they had, and they drilled into their bagpipes to lower the pitch so that it could play with an orchestra. It's completely hollowed out, and he basically dropped it 45 cents or 45 hertz just so he could play with an orchestra. So now he can't use that for normal bagpipe stuff. It's like just his orchestra pipes.
See, but that kind of touches on some of my thought process with this because bagpipes, especially. I've heard bagpipes in a parade setting or as a dirge, like
Yep.
and they're a very emotional instrument. I mean, those instruments, when left in their raw form, will make you cry. And they have this sound that is so ceremonial, I guess would be the word I'm looking for. And that's what my curiosity with the frequency is as you kind of try to couple everything into this box. In the rabbit holes I've been in, and my curiosity is like, how much do we lose of the connected nature of music with the soul and spirit? I guess I'm saying. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah. For a lot of the frequency stuff, I can understand like the resonance because there are certain frequencies that your body will feel it. Like, have you ever heard like a really low bass note and your gut just goes?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's called sympathetic vibrations, and we've dealt with that before. When you play something and something in the room buzzes, what it is you're playing it at the frequency that thing is kind of tuned to. Naturally speaking, lots of things are tuned that way.
Right.
And so what it does is the waves are the right speed, and it's like, oh, I'll join you. I'll amplify it, which for a light fixture or whatever, it's just a buzz. But for something like, say, the sitar that has like 100 strings on it or whatever, all of those strings, you play one and like 4 of them resonate with the instrument. So that way it's louder and more colorful.
That's fascinating to me. It just fascinates me. I mean, I've heard it and definitely know, but when you start talking the science behind it, that
Oh, yeah.
pluck a string, the other string either across the room or a light fixture in the same resonance response.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole reason why we have harmonics as well. Do you know what harmonics are?
I know what harmonics are on a layman's
Okay.
term. I mean,
So there's like the harmonic progression thing. So you have the fundamental, which is the note that you play.
okay.
But then there are these other notes that happen even though you played one note. And those are the harmonics. That's what gives you the body of your sound. So for an organ, they play a C, but you hear like organ. And that's because you hear the C, but you also hear a C an octave higher, but it's a little bit quieter than the main C. And then there's another note that you might hear, and then there's another note you might hear. An easy way to see that is in the old days, trumpets and things, they didn't have the valves.
Okay.
They had one tube, and they would blow into the tube and they'd make the note. But they had several notes to play with. Have you ever like seen a video of that sort of stuff?
Seen a video, and my father was a trumpet player live.
Oh, there you go.
Theory of horn, I kind of understand.
So what it is they call them partials, and basically the speed that their lips are buzzing changes the note that they play. They're all based off of the harmonics. So that specific tube, let's say it's tuned to a C, because why not? It can get that low C, it can go up an octave higher. It can go up a fifth higher than that to get G, and then it can go up a fourth higher than that to get another C. And then it does like a major third and then a minor third, and then it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is why when they play low notes, you get like one note. But when you get to the higher notes, they're like they can get like actual passages of melodic content. That's the harmonic progression thing.
Wow. Have you ever had somebody explain this in this way to you, John? Have you ever heard?
Not even my band teacher.
My head's
I'm
kind of
learning so much
exploding right now.
No, that's a good
Well,
thing.
because I've
though.
been playing music for years.
Yeah.
And I understand and practice what he's talking about, but he's actually explaining why it is so.
Well, that's why we have chords.
Well, you're explaining to me why you have funk bass, but generally a bass is boom,
Yep.
boom, boom. But
But then the keys, they have
Pitchy-
like a billion notes.
pitchy rock guitar lead is and you just
Yep.
explained why to me in a scientific way. My head just kind of
That's why I love talking to the Dodges. They,
I know,
they
it's-
break things down and explain it to a way it's like, I didn't think about that.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Part of the reason why it matters to me is, like, for instance, the vibraphone. I talk about it a lot because, well, I play one a lot.
Yeah.
When you go to tune the bars, you have to go take them to a professional to tune them. They tune it up to the sixth harmonic. So what I mean by that is the fundamental note, the note that we actually want, that when you hit it, that's what it sounds. They have it so that note is perfectly in tune, but that's not good enough for our ears. It'll still sound wrong if all the other harmonics don't line up. It also changes how loud that note is, because if they're not together, then the sound kind of like dies out a little bit, because they fight with each other. And so what they do is they tune all the way up to the sixth harmonic, so that way everything is fighting with each other. And so that's why the vibraphone gets such long notes when you just dink one thing. Yeah.
So is that kind of where the term sharp and flat comes with? Because the sharp kind of cuts through? I mean, and maybe I'm thinking off base. I'm using my construction carpenter, non-college educated brain to try and fit this together into a...
I mean, that's usually how I teach it is, I think of sharp as like, something sharp is poking you. What do? Your voice goes high. And then a flat is like a flat tire. What does your car do? It zags.
Huh.
My head's exploding right now.
Yeah. But
Pretty awesome.
I don't know exactly where the sharps and flats came from, but I bet you it's a similar type of situation.
No, I'm thinking of the times. I mean, I'm so dependent on the snark anymore, but every once in a while I got to sit there and hand tune a guitar. And I have never had. Why couldn't you have been my high school? I'm serious. I mean, I had never had somebody just kind of explain in a way that I could perceive what you've just explained. Because I can hear notes when they're sharp or flat, and they have that distinct feel. You'll play a chord, especially when you're an acoustic guitar player, and you'll go, something's biting,
Yep.
and you don't quite know. But if you look for that bite, then all you got to do is flat. And then there's times it's like, well, this feels dead.
Yep.
Something's dead. And you don't quite know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to know like things like harmonics, because like a major chord or whatever is actually based off of the harmonics.
And that's why when a lot of hand technique to a guitar would be the harmonics that are making sure all 6 strings.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I just took a whole semester of music in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, Brandon.
Oh yeah. The physics of music is pretty insane. And I don't know all of it. I just know, fun facts.
But those are really interesting facts for me as a musician,
Yeah, they're really good facts.
and us as we're starting to record, to to identify it the way you just identified it.
Yeah. It's really useful when you're making music, composing songs. Because if you know like the fundamental is really important, that's why the bass guitar always plays the root. Is because they're the anchor for the whole song. But then what gives it all the color and the nuance and the beauty, it's all those chords that are on top that are way up above the bass. You have the anchor, so now you have a reference point, and then everything else is the harmonics on top that's kind of giving you the colors that you're looking for. And
Colors and so many things.
Oh, yeah.
My head is suddenly understanding that. Yeah, I don't know what to pick. I mean, you could pick any genre of music, but I'm thinking of rock guitar leads, Pink Floyd or whatever. And you just explained to me why, they were playing D bar chord or whatever, and suddenly in Comfortably Numb, when that guitar comes out of nowhere, it comes over the top, not in volume. It comes over because he bends the string sharp.
Yep.
And it starts to pierce through the other chords and come out front. And that's why it sounds so distinctual, even though it's not louder, but it gets a distinction because you sharpen it when you bend a string.
Yep.
And you pull it up above the rest of the chord structure, and it comes out front and defines that note. Am I explaining it fairly properly?
No, that's totally accurate. It's the frequency space. Think of it like a pool, like a community pool. Okay. If all of the notes are in the same spot, like the same octave or whatever, it's like everyone's huddled in one small spot in the pool. But if you spread it out a bit, like the bass player is on one side of the pool, and then you have the guitar player in the middle, then the singer is usually floating over the top of everything else. Now it's all nice and spread out. People can enjoy swimming in their pool.
Without being all crowded. And
exactly. Now, the lower notes, like the bass guitar, they need their space. And that's why a lot of sound guys, they have the age-old problem of the kick drum on the drum set and the bass guitar note. They're close enough that they can fight with each other.
They cancel each other out.
So you got to be careful with that.
It's a good thing we're recording this, John. I think I'm going to go back and reference.
We're going to have to take notes.
Well, because the studio's new. John's way more proficient than I have. I've been playing music my whole life.
Yeah.
Put me in front of one of those X32s, and I'm a little, I have no idea what to do.
But it's a similar thing with just the lead guitar and the rhythm guitar. The rhythm guitar is usually doing like chords near the bottom, and then the lead guitar usually pops up a little bit. And that's so they stay out of the way of each other.
Wow. Are you going to send me a bill for this?
No. First one's free. No.
Hey, we got to pay him for the next interview.
Nah.
I had no idea.
It's more of a teaching session than
I
that.
mean, Brandon, we've sat and talked about this, but I've never touched on. I can't imagine what you are as a music educator. I mean, it's like, and I'm not trying to.
It's a weird world for me as a music educator because, as a beginner, there's just things that you have to learn. So most of the stuff we don't talk about it. We mostly just talk about like you have to hold the sticks right, or you have to hit it this way or whatever, because it's all about health fundamentals. How long can you play? Or how do we do things without damaging your body so you can continue to do this? And then after that, a lot of it is facility. Like now you can play it this way or that way, or here's some rhythms that might be hard for you or whatever.
So you actually teach skills because you teach percussion. So that means you're teaching a lot of drummers. And my heart just broke because I just saw an interview of Phil Collins. Big Genesis Phil Collins fan, 80s baby. That's me. I was in high school in the middle of the 80s. So, but I mean, the guy's back is just torched. I mean, he can barely walk anymore. And it's from drumming his whole life. So you actually instill proper forming techniques.
Yep.
So a drummer would have, because I've known how many drummers that are just jacked up.
And a lot of that is, like the 80s, it was a big deal to have like the cymbals way up here, and then the drums are like kind of high up and a little, so it's like you can barely see their face.
Right.
Well, the problem with that is the mechanics of our body. We don't like this. It puts work on our shoulder and our back. Well, guess what you have to do to hit that cymbal? Yeah, and now you have to put force on it every time you do it. So if you do that long enough, depending on how you're doing it, your back just can't keep up. So there's a healthy way to do that. And then what most people did, because, the rock era was about the garage band that turns to superstars. They didn't take like lessons and learn from somebody, most of them.
No, and a lot of
You
it
know?
was show. I mean, I
Yeah.
grew up. That's part of what I was talking about with Friends of the Zindan is breaking that perception of the double, in rock. I mean, the
Yep.
double bass kick, wall
Yep.
of cymbals, Neil Peart,
Oh, yeah.
Fortress of Drums thing
Mhm.
that you perceive makes a really cool drummer. Although as I get older and older, watching somebody like yourself take or Robert, he's taking a suitcase and building a whole drum kit out of the thing, I mean, and getting a collage of sounds out of the whole thing. And then you go,
Mhm.
well, that's interesting. But
Oh, yeah. And I have nothing against, like Terry Bozzio and Neil Peart and all those people who have, like you said, an army of drums. It's just so long as people do it in a healthy way.
I've seen your warehouse, so you don't have anything. Get somebody with the Fortress of Drums.
Oh no. You can never have too much.
I took a tour the other day, and I'm definitely talking to a man with a drum fetish.
Yeah.
There's
Wow.
just a couple in there.
Do you have any questions for Brandon? I've been kind of monopolizing
No,
this,
you're
John.
fine. You're
what about
fine,
you,
man.
Sid? Sid, do you have any questions? You're kind of just sitting over there in the
Look at that. I'm answering questions. Woohoo.
it's interesting, and so I'm just still trying to assimilate this conversation. Let's segue into another thing. Help me, John.
Let's talk about the show that he's gonna do.
Okay.
Oh,
What
yeah.
are you going to do? I looked it up. April 9th.
April 9th.
Sunday, April 9th.
Perfect.
Tag, you're it, John. I'm off.
It's actually Easter Sunday.
Oh, perfect.
How are you going to get a turnout on Easter
I have
Sunday?
no clue.
I mean, and are you okay working with? Because I did not realize that.
I
And
won't
did
have
you
anything
realize that?
No.
I want to rethink that one a little bit.
Okay.
We'll make a
We'll
date
think
of
of-
that
yeah.
for you. But you might not want to do Easter.
Maybe not.
But pretty much any Sunday is available for me.
We can do
whatever
a
you wanna
Sunday. We can do a weekday. And that far out, we could probably get you a Saturday.
Okay. Cool.
But talk to your bandmates and see if they genuinely want to
Will
do
do.
Easter. That might be a tough one to get people away from the family and
That
the
is
brunch. And
that is true, yeah. Yeah, so we're going to start out with it's Bata drumming. Bata is a it's usually connected to like a religion. It's Santeria.
Connected to a religion.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which Santeria
That's
is
interesting to me. I just find that interesting.
Oh yeah. Which Santeria is it's a weird, interesting religion from my perspective. I'm an outsider. I don't know much about it, but from like a very broad understanding, it is basically like a mixture of Catholicism and a bunch of African religions all smushed into one.
Really?
Yeah, because when the slaves, back to the slave trade,
Right.
when the slaves ended up having to come to the Americas,
Right.
their captors basically said, become Catholic or die. Right? Because you're not allowed to have
They
your
were
religion.
Missionaries and sure.
So what they said is, oh yeah, St. Peter's a pretty cool guy, except St. Peter is actually Chongo or whoever. It's somebody that's in their religion, even though they're gonna say it's St. Peter. So they hid their religion inside of another religion, and it kind of created this weird mishmash thing that turned into its own thing.
Wow.
Yeah, that's my very minor understanding of it. That is a very deep.
That's so huge,
you know.
and actually segues on our prior conversation.
Mhm.
So, because as I'm starting to perceive this moving forward, you're explaining a whole genre of music
Mhm.
here in America. We country music, hip hop. It's all driven by African tribes.
Yes.
I mean, they definitely have more rhythm than us with less of
Mm-hmm.
skin tone folks. Us. Maybe skin tone has something to do with rhythm or something. I mean,
Well, what it is,
and I
is
say
comment.
that
comment.
respectfully. I mean,
yeah, what it is the focus. In Africa, the focus was all about the dance and all about like community. Everyone joins in and is together. A lot of America's traditions which were a mishmash of a bunch of them, but a lot of us came from Europe, and Europe was all about the harmony, the melody, the stuff that we were just talking about with harmonics. They were all about that kind of thing. And so, yes, there was rhythm, but the rhythm wasn't as important as these extravagant like chords and things that were going on. It was all about like these giant things that you have to spend hours or years or whatever
Yeah,
learning.
you're talking classical symphonies and
Mm-hmm.
Beethoven's and
Exactly.
those type of things.
Whereas in Africa, it's like, yes, we have tradition, we have music all over the place. And a lot of them was like, hey, we do this for like a party or a celebration. We do this for a funeral, but everyone's involved. Everyone's got to dance. Everyone's got to sing. People are going to be learning how to play drums. Like it's just all inclusive. Everyone's involved. None of this sit down in a concert hall and just, you know.
Well, and passively consume. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually true as we listen to music even in the modern day. I mean, I appreciate classical music and really good musicianship. But I appreciate hip hop as much because and hip hop and classical music affects me different.
Yep.
You know,
It's just different tools.
As gangly and stupid as I look, I will attempt to dance to hip hop. It doesn't look good, but it happens.
I've seen it. It doesn't look good. But sometimes, like hip hop, because there's been times where I've gone to hip hop concerts or whatever, and back like in the early 2000s to late 2000s, they always used a track. You know, they always had a DJ on stage, and like nowadays they still have a DJ on stage, but they have a live drummer. They have people playing the guitar, people playing the bass, and it just makes the song like that much better.
Yeah.
Like it just sounds good, like whenever you have, like those rap songs and stuff, and then they use a live drummer and live instruments, it just gives it a different feel, and you appreciate it a lot more because it's like, okay, well, this guy's really wanting people to enjoy their music to the point to where he has a band or she has a band. They have full band set up, and it's not just what you expect, like, oh, DJ's just gonna play a track and I'm gonna rap over what I already rapped. I hate when people do that. But, like they don't even use an instrumental. It's literally like the track they release on the radio and they'll rap over it.
Oh yeah.
But, if you have a live band there playing the same exact song, like the Roots, they're huge on, playing live hip hop music. And I love it a lot more.
We were talking about a band that made me fall in love with them for that. Oh, Tony Rich.
Tony Rich Project?
Because they fell out of that. And they have some of it, but they played a lot of live instruments, and that's what made me a fan of Tony Rich when they came around. It was this hip hop, but it wasn't midied and it wasn't tracked. They were actually up there playing it, and that made a lot of appeal to them.
And that's an interesting like cultural thing, because way back when like the drum machine first came out, everyone's like, "Oh, this is the coolest thing ever! We can make the computer play." And then as the computer got better and as people started using it more and more, and people were just producing like out of their rooms or wherever, where it's like one guy and he created the whole symphony or whatever. A lot of people are like, wait a second, we still want the musician part. We still want live people doing things. And then some people are like, I don't care, it sounds good. So it's like this weird like...
It cycles, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We like the new shiny until it starts to go after what the old used to do.
Right, because I experienced the whole cycle you're talking about as a child, because I was, as I mentioned to you, my dad was a professional trumpet player up in the big rooms of Tahoe, playing in 17 to 30-plus piece bands, 5 nights a week. And then you hit the early 80s, and all this tracked music and drum machines and canned music, and the band's reduced.
Yep.
And he worked less and less and less the last decade of his life. It just dried up. But then as that rolled through the 90s, it didn't take long for people to get sick of it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, man, I need real music. Because and that's something we were talking about AI and AI coming out right now. And what that's possibly going to do to artistry and revolutionize, mixing. And even, AI is writing songs for people and stuff like that. But I imagine it'll just cycle like Brandon's talking about.
Yeah. Well, they have done some studies. They've taken groups of people, and there was a piece of music. One was performed exclusively by the computer. No human hand did anything outside of like input notes or whatever. And then they got a professional orchestra to play the exact same song, exact same speed and everything. And more often than not, the people who were listening to the two examples, for whatever reason, they're like, this one doesn't feel right. And that was the computer one. This one feels a little bit better, even though it's the exact same music. For some reason, a lot of humans naturally gravitate towards the soul that humans bring. It's not perfect, but for whatever reason, that's what gives it its beauty.
No, you actually have to breathe your life into an instrument, especially if it's a woodwind or a brass instrument, or you have to, with your fingertips, create vibration. It's vibration and frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take out the humanity of it, suddenly we're not as connected to it.
Yeah.
It really locks me into the spirituality of music.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, as this conversation unfolds.
Yeah, I like that stuff a lot. There's actually there's like this meditative thing that I do with people sometimes, where like you're angry, you're stressed, you're sad, whatever it is, and I've gone through where you play a song, and then I give them a prompt throughout the song. I ask them to like visualize certain things, think about certain things. And I don't ask for like any answers. They're just meant to create whatever it is they create. And then usually by the end of the song, they're back to like focusing on breathing or whatever. And then when they come back to, the room that they're in and the music's done and everything's done, turns out they were angry because they forgot breakfast, or they were angry because they're tired, or, those are the two main things, is like food, water, and sleep. Usually that's the
Basic
things. Issue.
We're all such toddlers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You get as old and as mature as you want, but at the end of the day,
Ain't nothing that a bowl of cereal and a nap ain't gonna
Yep.
fix, man. We actually started hosting. We did our first one. We have another one coming up, and we just did an interview last week with Michelle. Sound baths.
yeah.
And they, I've heard about them, and I've definitely been on YouTube looking at it, but be in a room where they were doing that, because she had a whole collage of singing bowls, and her husband brings in this wall of gongs.
Yep.
And John's over there trying to mix it, and he's having a hard time because he's like, there's just too much frequency going on.
Yeah, that
man."
was the only thing. Like every time there was a different frequency that came on, and I wasn't aware of where it was coming from, automatically in my head, I'm just all like, it's feedback. Something's feeding back. Something's feeding back. And then when you look at the EQ and you see it's just one spike, I'm like, oh wait, that's not feedback. It's the bowl, and it was just like stuff I'd never heard before.
Oh yeah.
And then I guess with the gongs, we had a few microphones on the gongs, but I guess it just didn't pick up that feeling.
Yes.
That you get when it didn't translate as well in the stream as it did in person. So that's something that we got to work on for this Saturday. But other than that, it was just a different experience to hear all that stuff, in the same room, and it's still, music. It's a form of music that it's there, and people still, they love it, appreciate it, perfect it, and it was just really dope to be a part of it.
I'm more and more I'm struck, and even by this conversation, it's just making it more clear. I have had trouble sleeping and been coming across YouTube and found the 809,000 megahertz help you sleep.
Yep.
8-hour video, that kind of thing. And those are cool, but they ain't nothing like sitting in the room with the gong and the bowls.
Yep.
Because you can't explain the change you actually feel in your physiology when those actual instruments are creating those sound waves, and it's not just kind of packaged together and regurgitated out of a sound system. You're sitting in the bass hit and that wave,
Yep.
Cascading over you, and you'll never get that except for being there. I mean, we could probably get really good, but I don't think we'll ever be able to engineer what actually comes off of one of those sound baths.
Probably not, because I mean, if you think of it, sound bath, all of the instruments are right over there, and you're in the room, and all the waves are flowing throughout the room.
Right.
When you listen through speakers, it's like a shower head.
Very good
Right?
analogy for sure.
So
Very
so
good.
so it's not a bath.
So it's the difference between being in the pool
Yep,
and taking a shower.
pretty much, yeah.
And so no matter how good your headphones are, no matter how good,
Because it doesn't hit your whole body. It hits mostly your ears, whereas a sound bath, it's not just, you're not listening with just your ears. And
Right,
and
yeah,
just like what we were talking about with the frequencies and how it's like impossible to mix, it's because there's so much stuff that's not necessarily going on
it's
that a
not
microphone
audio.
just can't
It's
pick
a
up.
different sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why you got to be there. That's why everyone says like live concerts are better than watching the YouTube video.
Absolutely.
Oh,
You know?
yeah. You can
And
feel it,
why is
especially when
actually-
KD Sound is doing the sound.
Yeah.
You definitely feel it.
But for sure. But this is actually, and in this very conversation, it's like, oh, well, that's why.
hmm
You know, it's one thing to hear a killer lead. Whatever kind of music you're into, Latin or this and that. It's another thing to see, 3 wiggly backup singers and all the energy visually. It's not just an audio experience. It's visual, the bass taps you were talking about, gut feeling. I mean, music is a all sensory, at least in a live setting. And I wonder what we lose by not experiencing. Go to a live concert, guys. This is the big plug for live
Yeah.
music.
Seriously.
Actually, it's funny. So a lot of people are like, how do deaf people listen to music, right?
What do they hear?
They can't hear it, right? Actually, the Grateful Dead, they've been doing this for years. There is a group of hardcore Grateful Dead fans who are completely deaf. And they've
Really?
actually sectioned off certain parts of their concert venue for the deaf people to just like, this is where you sit, this is where you stand or whatever. And it's usually right next to those big subs.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
it's right by the subs. I
Yep.
wonder what they hear that we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder what they experience that we're so blinded to by our other senses or this and that
Mhm.
that we don't hear. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to wrap all this together. I had no idea I was going to get the education I was going to.
Oh, no worries. It's how it goes. There's a lot out there. That's what I like about music is you can spend your whole life and even if you've like dedicated yourself to learning constantly, it's a drop in the bucket. You can't possibly know it all. It's just so much. I've been told like you can spend 30 years or something to master your instrument, to master your craft. Yeah, that's one instrument, right?
Well, even that one instrument.
And even that one
Even
instrument,
that one
you're
instrument
not getting
just
everything.
expands. It
Yeah,
just
exactly.
expands.
So,
Man. All right. So we'll get a show going in April. I saw you brought a couple drums. Maybe we won't have time for it, but are you willing to make this kind of a regular stop for a while? You were,
I'm gonna try to.
fit us into, I mean, I don't want to oblige you to yet another thing, but you are a most welcome guest.
No, thanks.
It's,
Absolutely, man.
I actually had no idea. I mean, I knew, but I had no idea because we've never sat and talked like this. I mean, we're always just
Busy.
doing something. I
Yeah.
mean, we're dragging the sound equipment around for Kelly, or he's here helping us with something, or we're doing a show. And it's been actually quite a pleasure to just sit down and visit with you, Brandon. I'm
Oh yeah, it's always fun.
very open to that. So I may be reaching out to you to kind of do this a little more regularly. And I respect that you're busy, and we'll do that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I would very much enjoy doing stuff like this. This stuff is like my jam. I don't get to do it very often, but when I do, it's like, oh, this is visit, talk about fun things, maybe introduce some new things to people. It's like semi-educational, but it's more just like fun and enjoyable.
Absolutely. Let's make sure we do some drum samples next time, though.
Sure.
We'll bring an instrument. Let's set it up on the sound stage. We did a really fun video over the pandemic where he came in with the xylophone or those.
Oh,
keys,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we made that. Oh, what was the title of that one we made?
Winking, blinking, and
That
nodding
one.
off.
And it came. Did you ever see that, John?
I did.
That
Yeah.
thing was
Yeah.
wild. That was like
Because I remember Kelly was giving me like specific instructions one time that they were going to go on stage and perform it. And he's he told me certain things. I'm like, okay, all right, well, I guess it's your show. You do what you got to do.
Fun fact: that song's actually going to show up during the Batama concert. We're going to play it again.
You
Very
guys, so
nice.
start putting that. We're going to be in April. We'll come up with a date for sure. Make sure we can corral them, but watch for them coming out. This will give you a taste of what you're up for and a little background in the music you play.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm definitely going to come. I've seen Freemium. I've seen you do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This conversation is going to make seeing those a little different than I've. So, you got anything you want to share or anything before we wrap up, Brandon?
Not really. I mean, thanks to A to Zen and Mike over here, as well as John. You guys have been great hosts, and I think this is a great thing what you guys have been doing. I mean, I've seen you guys a few years ago and where you started and where you are now and where you're going. It's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to all the magic that's going to be coming out of this place.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, we're going to do our finale to that CD drop over at the BAC. I don't know if Kelly told you about that at all or anything.
Oh no, I'll have to.
We're going to start rolling it out song by song. It's going to be 8 artists. And then we booked the performance hall for September to do the actual
nice.
CD drop. To which I am looking for a day Katie Sound's free because I'm going to be quite dependent on Katie Sound to help with lighting and
Yep.
do all that. And now you're doing. So are you just doing backline or what is your involvement?
So
with?
I am joining Katie Sound Co. here pretty soon, and basically he is expanding to a new wing. He does stage, he does sound, and now we're gonna add in backline. So guitar amps, drum sets, percussion, whatever you need. I'm gonna be basically helping with that, running that here pretty soon. So then it's going to be more of an all-in-one package. You need a concert, here's the guy to talk
No
to.
kidding.
Concert in a box.
He needs to grow his hair out though in case he has to be talent too.
That's what the wigs are for. You can rent them.
I don't know, man. He came in here and dropped a song called the Soundman Blues. I can't ever get
Oh,
him to play it ever
yeah.
again. It was so funny. Did you ever hear that, John?
Mm.
And I can't get him to do it. He did it one night. It opened my
And he'll
ears.
Is
never
that
do
the
it
song
again.
that Al keeps talking about?
Oh,
where
man,
he,
it
where
is
he
just-
says, "Oh, Kelly made a badass song."
It was
and-
awesome. It was completely awesome.
Oh, I gotta.
Yeah,
tell
you
him
got to
play
watch
it one
out.
day.
Every once in a while, he reminds you he's also a musician. Every once in a while.
No, Kelly's a good guy. It's actually been a really good treat because we've always just peripherally bumped into each other doing
Mhm.
something else. Thank you. I appreciate you coming by.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Just doing the talk and this and that. And anything to add before we sign off, Mr.
No,
Big John Rodriguez?
that's about it.
All right. You guys take care. Thanks.